Taylor,
Yes.
can we talk about John Elway?
Oh.
I've been dying to talk about John Elway this whole podcast. Can we please talk about John Elway?
Yeah, tell me about John Elway.
Taylor, John Elway sucks.
Why does John Elway suck?
John Elway was never actually that good. I want to start with just who John Elway is perceived as being. You know, NFL did their 100 greatest players.
Mm-hmm.
They did this weird thing where they kind of did 10 players from each group, and they did 10 different kinds of groups, right? So they just picked 10 quarterbacks. John Elway was one of the 10 best quarterbacks of all time in this ridiculous exercise. And that gels with a lot of people's perceptions of John Elway, right? They think of John Elway as being one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. So let's take a trip back just to set the stage here. John Elway, first overall pick in 1983, famously great quarterback class. John Elway, Dan Marino, Jim Kelly, all Hall of Famers. Todd Blackledge, infamous in Chiefs lore. But John Elway, as you probably know, his last game in college was against Cal. He lost on the play where the band came on the field. Cal won on this 5 lateral kickoff return. John Elway, in sort of a portent of things to come, sort of previewing his antics at Arrowhead when he asked the refs to calm the crowd down, he was quoted as saying the refs ruined his last game in college. That is a direct quote. So in that game, John Elway, yeah, exactly. John Elway had 4th and 17 on his own 13-yard line in that game with 2 minutes to go. He did end up going down, getting the go-ahead score, right? So he put his team in position to win the game. This is kind of where the whole John Elway thing, it's all just a product of myth-making, right? It's all about narratives. And even though that narrative didn't work out for him, that's kind of where it all starts. So here's the thing about narratives. They're bullshit.
Total. 100%.
Let's talk about John Elway in comparison to his peers. Because the thing that you always hear, which is true, is that you can't compare quarterbacks across eras. The NFL is constantly evolving. I want to compare John Elway to the people that played at the same time as John Elway, because I can tell you, compared to those quarterbacks, he still wasn't very good. So let's start with the numbers. John Elway played from 1983 to 1998. That was his career. He played for 16 years. In that time span, there were 19 different quarterbacks that started 100 or more games, including John Elway.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to look at some numbers here, starting with completion percentage. And I would just want to read off his ranks to you.
Okay.
19 quarterbacks. Those quarterbacks included Dan Marino, Steve Young, Joe Montana, Brett Favre, Jim Kelly, Warren Moon, Troy Aikman, some really good players. Boomer Esiason, he had his moments. You got Ken O'Brien. You got Jeff George. Now we're kind of getting down to the bottom of the barrel. Jim Harbaugh, Bernie Kosar, Bobby Herbert. John Elway in completion percentage ranks 16th out of those 19 quarterbacks.
16 from the bottom or from the top?
Yeah, 16 from the top, 3 from the bottom. So closer to the bottom end. Touchdown percentage, 13th out of 19.
Woof.
Not very good. Still in the bottom half. You know, you're talking about 19 quarterbacks, so the median 50th percentile would be 10th out of 19, right? 9.5 out of 19.
Yeah.
Quarterback rating, 14th out of 19.
14th.
Yeah, 14th.
You're
so
joking.
there weren't 14 quarterbacks that were top 10 quarterbacks of all time playing at the same time as John Elway. That is impossible.
That would be impossible. That's right.
And it is impossible. Yards per attempt, 10th out of 19. So, he's kind of
Yeah.
middle of the pack there.
Sure.
Adjusted net yards per attempt, which is taking sacks out of the equation, 11th out of 19.
Geez, now isn't he supposed to have this rocket arm that he should always be throwing bombs down the field? Shouldn't his yards per attempt be the one thing that he has over everyone else?
Yes, and he's playing in an era of bad passing. That's what everybody says is, oh, you can't compare him. We're comparing him to the people that he played with at the same time as him.
Yeah.
Okay, and he wasn't comparable. We're going to talk about why I think that is in a little bit, but I want to just throw some more numbers at you here real quick. So John Elway has 10 more career touchdowns than Warren Moon. We talked about Elway's at 300, Marino at 420, Warren Moon at 290. John Elway had 29 more starts than Warren Moon. So he had 10 more touchdowns. So he finished,
2 more years.
He retired at, when he retired, he had the second most touchdown passes of all time. Okay, well, Warren Moon had 10 fewer touchdown passes, but he played 2 years less. John Elway actually started 2 fewer games than Dan Marino, who threw
way more touchdowns.
120 more touchdown passes, right? Just an outrageous number of touchdown passes. I want to get into. I did a fun little exercise. I'll let you play a little guessing game here. So I did a little exercise where I took John Elway's career highs. So 16-year NFL career. I pulled out his career high in several different categories.
Okay.
And I want you to tell me where you think that ranks in terms of all the seasons in John Elway's career. So we've got a sample size of 1983 to 1998.
Okay.
We're going to start with touchdown passes. So John Elway's career high in touchdown passes was 27. Doesn't seem very high.
27.
Yeah. So there were, I want you to guess how many seasons of 28 or more touchdown passes there were in the 16 years that John Elway was playing. So everybody who had at least one season better than John Elway's best season throwing touchdowns during his career.
I've got to figure that, and it was the age before, everyone was throwing 30 every year and stuff like that. But I would think, and how many seasons is this that you said?
We're talking about a 16 years.
16.
I didn't write down the total number of quarterback seasons. I should have done.
Well, that's all right. I would
guess
in 16 years, people going over 28 probably happened an average of 2 to 3 times a year. So
that's
I would think that he's between 32 and 48. That's a big gap, but that's where I'm thinking.
That is an amazing guess, and I love that you showed your work as you were doing that because it is 37 is the answer.
Yes, love it.
There were 37 seasons of 28 or more touchdown passes by 21 different quarterbacks during John Elway's career.
That's trash.
It is trash. And let me just read some names off to you, Taylor.
Yeah, tell me who did it.
Here are the quarterbacks that had a better season with more passing touchdowns than John Elway during John Elway's career. Jeff George did it. Neil Lomax did it.
Yeah, sure, old Neil.
Eric Kramer did it. Scott Mitchell.
Oh.
Vinny Testaverde did it. Danny White did it.
Danny White, nice. There's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
Jeff Blake.
Ooh.
Lynn Dickey.
Ooh.
Jim Everett.
Oh, no.
And then actual good quarterbacks.
Yeah, right.
Dan Marino did it a bunch of times.
Right.
Joe Montana did it several times. But those aren't Hall of Fame quarterbacks, Taylor.
No, and they played at the same time he did.
And they played at the same time he did. So
why could they do it and he couldn't do it?
Well, because he wasn't that good. So let's talk about passing yards. This is a fun one. John Elway's career high is 4,030 passing yards.
Okay.
So you want to guess again how many seasons you think there were of more than 4,030 passing yards
seasons? So I'm going to guess fewer than 30 or than 28 touchdowns by about 5. So I'm going to go with like 32.
Pretty good. 26 is the answer.
More.
So again, this is taking John Elway's best season ever, most passing yards in his career, 4,030. 26 times in his career, another quarterback that wasn't John Elway threw for more yards than that.
Than he ever did in his whole 16-year career.
In his whole career. Those include the aforementioned Lynn Dickey, Scott Mitchell, Neil Lomax, Don Majkowski. You ever heard of that guy?
No, and you and I have heard of tons
A
of
lot.
guys.
We have. Bill Kinney, shout out to Bill Kinney,
Yeah,
former Chief.
that's right.
Bill Kinney did it with the Chiefs. Jay Schroeder.
Ooh, I'm pretty sure he's an
Jacksonville.
actor.
He is an actor. We'll get into a really good one here in a minute.
Okay.
Jacksonville Jaguar Mark Brunell did it.
Yeah, of course.
Completion percentage, you don't have to guess on this one. John Elway's career best completion percentage, 63.2. 29 seasons better than that.
No.
In his career. Yards per attempt, 7.9 yards per attempt.
7.9?
Yeah, never broke 8. 29 seasons better than John Elway's career high, including, in addition to some of the goofballs that we were talking about earlier, some dude named Wade Wilson.
Oh, that's Daredevil.
Yeah, it's Deadpool, bro.
Deadpool,
Come on.
Deadpool. I always confuse Deadpool and Daredevil's names. I know them character-wise, but I always say Wade Wilson is Daredevil, and I mean
what is Daredevil?
Matt Murdock.
Okay.
Yeah. Wade Wilson, Matt Murdock. Yeah. It's
for people that are gonna shred Taylor on Twitter. He knows a lot about superheroes.
I do. It is a slip of the tongue that happens almost every time I refer to either Deadpool or Daredevil. I always say the other one. Don't know why.
So Deadpool threw for a higher yards per attempt in a season than John Elway did. Okay.
Wow.
So finally, we're going to do passer rating. Passer rating isn't a good stat, but like it's not a terrible stat, right? Like the problem with passer rating is you can't take a passer rating from 2020 and compare it to a passer rating from 1985. You can't do that. Mm-hmm. But what you can do that is instructive is take all the passer ratings from 1985,
compare them to each other. Yes.
And even though it's not a perfect statistic, John Elway, he never had a good passer rating. So in his career, there are 34 seasons better than 93.0 passer rating. He got the usual suspects that we've been talking about. Mm-hmm. Add in Chris Chandler. Mm-hmm. Add in Steve Bartkowski.
Yeah, I love Steve Bartkowski.
Add in Tony Eason. Ugh. 34 different seasons during John Elway's 16-year career where they had a better passer rating than his best passer rating ever.
Man.
So John Elway, I mean, his career best seasons aren't even very good compared to the other quarterbacks he was playing with. And not just the great quarterbacks like Montana and Marino, but the bad ones even would manage a season better than John Elway's career best season.
Yep.
I want to talk about Dan Reeves. I don't know how much you know about Dan Reeves. What do you know about Dan Reeves?
I know that he was the coach that Broncos fans always blame for John Elway's failures.
That is correct. He is the coach that coached John Elway to 3 Super Bowl losses.
Right.
He started as an offensive coordinator with the Cowboys in the late 70s. Roger Staubach, Tom Landry. Mm-hmm. Won a Super Bowl with the Cowboys. And while he was with the Cowboys, his 4 years with the Cowboys, his Cowboys teams ranked in the 91st percentile of scoring offense in the NFL. So they were better at scoring the football than 91% of NFL teams over those 4 years. Then Dan Reeves gets hired as the head coach of the Broncos, and he takes over John Elway's young career. And I've had a lot of Broncos fans tell me that Dan Reeves is the reason that John Elway was producing these very pedestrian numbers.
I've certainly heard that.
Well, John Elway supposedly is a Hall of Fame GOAT quarterback. So, he came from one Hall of Fame GOAT quarterback in Roger Staubach, who was scoring at a very high rate. And then he takes over John Elway, and they were ranked 54th percentile in offensive points per game, despite having Taylor supposedly one of the 10 best quarterbacks of all time.
So what's the difference between Roger Staubach and John Elway?
I guess that Roger Staubach is a good quarterback. John Elway
that's
is
what I
not.
was wondering. Okay, that makes sense.
Let's talk about Dan Reeves' post-Broncos career.
The old Falcons run.
Yes, the Atlanta Falcons. In 1998, travel back in time with me. Dan Reeves was coaching the Atlanta Falcons, and his quarterback that year was a dude named Chris Chandler. Are you familiar with Chris Chandler?
Slightly familiar with Chris Chandler, but please enlighten me.
So Chris Chandler was 33 years old that year. He started 152 games in his NFL career, and his career record was 67-85.
Woof.
Woof indeed. In 1998, he started 14 games, and he goes 13-1. So if you take that year out, his career record was 54-83. Yes. So this is his second season with Dan Reeves, the guy who is responsible for John Elway being a turd for most of his Denver career. And here's what Chris Chandler, in his second season with Dan Reeves, this is what he was able to do. His completion percentage that year was of 58.1%. If you were to push that over into John Elway world, that would be John Elway's 7th highest completion percentage of his career.
Out of 16 years.
Out of 16
Way to go,
years.
Chris Chandler.
His yards per attempt was 9.6. John Elway's career high, you may recall, was 7.9.
Man.
So Chris Chandler blew him out of the water.
He was dropping dimes.
His touchdown percentage was 7.6. Elway's career high was 6.2.
Ooh.
His touchdowns, he threw 25 touchdowns that year. And Elway's career high was 27. So, okay, good for you, John.
Yeah.
John also threw 26 touchdowns twice. Problem is, John Elway in those seasons had 502, 466, and 542 pass attempts, respectively. Chris Chandler in 1998 threw 25 touchdowns on 327 pass attempts.
Wow.
And by the way, all three of those seasons that John Elway threw 26, 26, and 27 touchdowns were under Mike Shanahan, who is the original system QB coach.
Yeah.
We just saw his son with the same system take Jimmy frickin' Garoppolo to the Super Bowl, all right, and make Jimmy Garoppolo look like a good quarterback. Those 3 years of John Elway's career, at the very tail end of his career, those were better than his performances under Dan Reeves, which obviously wasn't Dan Reeves' fault since he was able to take Chris Chandler to the Super Bowl in the NFC, posting better numbers than John Elway ever did in the exact same system.
Wow.
But Mike Shanahan gets a hold of Elway at the end of his career, gives him those 3 career bests in touchdowns. With Dan Reeves, Elway's career high in touchdown passes was 22.
Ugh.
And
Can you
finally,
imagine that being your quarterback? Not my quarterback.
I can't. And in fact, 22, I mean, we had a pretty pathetic franchise touchdown record for a long time.
Yeah, we did.
But it was Len Dawson who set the record, like, when was it, 1969, 1970? And that was the record until 2018, which is a little embarrassing. But old Lenny Dawson threw more touchdowns than John Elway did in any season of his career, and he was back in the old AFL.
Yeah, he was.
He was slinging it.
Worse passing era than John Elway, and he was 10 times the quarterback John Elway was.
He was 10 times the quarterback John Elway was. So why is it that John Elway, why is he so highly regarded?
You know
I have
why?
some theories about this, but you tell me. You go.
I think it's all the freaking helicopter dive.
Yes.
I think that when he dove in the Super Bowl, I think people thought, oh my God, that is what a all-time GOAT quarterback would have done. And they just blinded themselves to the 16 years of tape that he had put out. And they just said that he just wills his team to win. I think if he never makes that run, his legacy is different.
You're completely right. And I think that is at the crux of what John Elway's GOATdom is all about. It's all about moments, and it's about narratives. And especially in the 80s and the 90s, back when things were real crude, football was real crude. Those were what mattered. Those were the things that got played on the clip shows that you saw. I mean, there's probably one clip show, right? I mean, it was on ESPN. You know, you'd see the Super Bowl, you'd watch the Super Bowl on the networks. The big games, those were what you watched because you couldn't just stream everything for free. And those were the things that people wrote about in newspapers. Remember those?
Yeah. Barely.
John Elway,
I heard about him.
Yeah, John Elway, aside from the couple of Super Bowls he won in the last 2 years of his career with Mike Shanahan, he's famous for something called The Drive, which was a game-winning 98-yard touchdown drive against the Cleveland Browns.
Man.
Imagine somebody, I mean, So Patrick Mahomes, just in this playoff run,
Mhm.
had 3 double-digit comebacks. John Elway had 2 double-digit comebacks in the playoffs in his entire career.
Jeez.
And yet,
He's the comeback guy.
he's the comeback guy. He's got the drive. It's just manufactured hype. It's nonsense.
You're cracking eggs of wisdom.
So I am cracking eggs of wisdom. I'll tell you what. Here's what happened. I'm just going to close with this. This is how John Elway became John Elway. It's the moments, it's the narratives, and it's also the fact that John Elway played for 16 years. Okay? Yeah. John Elway came along in this magical point in football history where like people didn't play that long until John Elway and Marino came along. They both played for a very long time. And now obviously we've gotten into Breeze and Brady and Rivers and everybody's playing into their 40s.
Right.
But back then, that was not the case. When John Elway retired, he had the second most quarterback starts in NFL history. He had 231 starts. He's 8 behind Fran Tarkenton, who of course played in a completely different era. And so old Fran didn't have the touchdown numbers. He didn't have the counting stats. Dan Marino was at 229 games. And then in 4th place in quarterback starts was Warren Moon, who had 202.
Jeez.
And
John Elway was just ancient.
He was. And no one else, 5th place, had 180 quarterback starts.
Jeez.
So John Elway in 2nd place had 50 more starts than the quarterback with the 5th most starts of all time.
That's a huge gap.
So he played a lot. He played longer than almost anybody, and he just put up a lot of counting stats. So when John Elway retired, he had the 2nd most touchdown passes. Now, mind you, he was like 100 touchdown passes behind Dan Marino,
sure,
who played the exact same number of games at the exact same period of time. They were drafted the exact same year. But people say, oh, John Elway, 2nd most touchdown passes all time. He must have been a GOAT. And John Elway, unlike Dan Marino, did end up winning 2 Super Bowls. John Elway also finished with more wins than Dan Marino did.
And that's the rub, QB wins.
And that's the rub. It's ridiculous. That's how we ended up with John Elway, top 10 quarterback of all time, NFL 100, over, by the way, Drew Brees, which is just insane.
Asinine.
Laughable, asinine, ridiculous. You know what it is?
It's preposterous.
It's preposterous. It is, dude. It is. It's preposterous.
John Elway. Love to trash him.
He sucked. The end.